What's up, Anchor peeps and Search Party fans? I am Anchor Pete, and I'm here with my lovely wife, Sherry T.
Hi.
Guys, just last week we talked about Search Party Season 4, Episodes 1 through 5, and we just finished it last night. So for today, we're going to be talking about Season 4, Episodes 6 through 10. We know that not all of you are Search Party fans, and not all of you have watched the show, but since we made our video, it sounds like a few of you are interested in watching it. So, do this. Go watch all of Search Party. Then watch our first episode, then come join us here for episodes 6 to 10.
Yeah, because we're going to be full of spoilers. We want to really dig into the show, and we're not going to hold back.
Boy, is there a lot of stuff that happens in episode 6 through 10. So yeah, this is spoiler central. You've been warned. Now that we've seen the last episode of season 4, how do you feel?
Well, I had to think about it. I thought about it all night last night. We just finished the final 2 episodes last night, and I was trying to decide if I liked them, if it mattered if I liked them. You mentioned feeling existential today. It definitely is a philosophical show more than I even realized. Our last discussion here, we talked about how the show is really about finding your identity. Boy, did they hammer that home in these last 2 episodes.
Yeah. The very last 2 episodes were all about having an existential crisis. So much that I had to bust out one of my lists where I started to write what I've done with my life and where I've lived and who I've known, because that is so much of the last 2 episodes of this show.
So you were inspired.
I wouldn't say I was inspired. It makes you ask these questions because there's characters on the show, particularly Dory, asking those exact questions. Like, why do I get up in the morning? Why do I live?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and when someone starts...
Yeah, and John Early says it's like a conversation I had with someone in college.
Yeah.
And he's real annoyed by it. But yeah, she's asking worthwhile questions because she's trying to be a deeper person who seeks out more meaningful experiences in life.
Yeah. And that's what the show's been about since season 1, when the show was still on TBS. The search is fully on with our characters, right? Drew and Elliot and Portia are now looking for Dory, and they go to the Stickies factory because they found out that Chip might be connected to these pastries, Stickies, right?
Right, which was total coincidence. The only way they figured this out is because one of them picked up a pastry in a convenience store and his picture was on it, and they're like, that's him.
Yeah.
So it's pure coincidence. I think that's kind of fun for the writers to make a crucial plot point be just a coincidence. Doesn't someone pretty famous do that, like the Coen brothers or...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, anyway.
I think it happens in, Breaking Bad and stuff,
yeah,
too.
certain writers like to do that kind
random.
of thing.
Yeah.
Quentin Tarantino.
Fargo. It definitely happens on Fargo.
That's why I said Coen brothers.
But I'm saying the show, too.
Well, that's inspired by this movie.
So they go to the Stickies factory, and it's just kind of funny. We see that Chip's family, they're wealthy because they own this, almost like Little Debbie's kind of franchise or Entenmann's kind of franchise.
Hostess.
Yeah, Hostess, too.
Yeah, it's an empire.
Yeah, and their family is twisted. And so we're talking about spoilers. Susan Sarandon eventually comes into the show, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Susan Sarandon, as we know, is his Aunt Lila. And later on, throughout the course of the show, we find out that Lila and his dad, they...
Played by?
Griffin Dunn?
Yeah, it's Dunn or Dune, right?
Yeah, whatever.
He's like kind of an 80s star. Chip
is the product of incest. And see, that kind of made me laugh because see, here's the thing.
It explains so much about Chip.
Yeah, I kind of wonder if there is going to be an article about how it's not fair to make fun of people with incest, right? Because
what do you mean with incest? It's not a disease.
Well, look, here's the thing. The reason why I was thinking about this is because some of the worst characters in TV or books too are characters that are made out of incest, right? Like Joffrey. And see, Chip kind of reminds me of Joffrey, right? Game of Thrones,
Look,
Song of Ice and Fire.
I love Flowers in the Attic, so there's plenty of good characters who come from incest.
Good incest made characters? Okay. Well, Chip is one of the bad ones, right?
He's a bad egg.
Yeah. And so,
can I say something about Susan Sarandon's part?
Of course.
So the makers of the show, Sarah-Violet Bliss and
Charles Rogers,
they are friends with Susan Sarandon's son.
Oh.
And that son is a fan of Search Party, and he was able to get Susan Sarandon to consider the part.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad that he did.
She was a little taken aback by the incest.
Oh, really?
Spin. Yeah, and they had to kind of cajole her with that But
Oh, you did a little research there.
yeah, I did.
One thing that was kind of cool, I like that they tied it in a little bow. Throughout the whole season, Chip kept asking people in convenience stores, "Do you have these candy bars that have a hole in the center?" And I'm like, "What the hell is he talking about?" And you find out that Susan Sarandon's character, Aunt Lila, was actually like making candy bars for him, so that like she would eat the little whole piece and he would eat the rest of it, and that was like her way of showing her love to her incest made son.
Right. So she said that she would eat the whole while he ate the candy bar, and it's some sort of, way of her trying to be one with him, I guess.
Even though she's not his legitimate mom.
It's a semi-touching moment. The show doesn't get that touching, so
It does. There's actually a couple touching moments in these last few episodes.
some of the most touching moments I think the show has ever had.
Yeah. But
Because it's not that kind of show.
Yeah. And there are super absurd moments, including this one moment that's in episode 7 called The Infinite Loop, which I thought was like one of the funniest things I ever saw, and like something I would have never predicted in my life. So eventually Susan Sarandon comes to the town of Babyfoot, where Dory's being held captive.
Which
right?
I don't know if that's a real town, but I need to look that up because that's a fabulous name.
Yeah. And what happens is Susan Sarandon starts to investigate to find Chip, and Chip's been dressed up like Susan Sarandon this whole time, right?
Another play on identity.
Yeah.
People are always dressing up like each other in this last few episodes. Like Portia's dressing like Dory.
Right.
Chip's dressing like Lila. Dory doesn't know who she is. There's a lot of identity
Yeah.
stuff.
It's just this like almost like Abbott and Costello or like old kind of like Shakespearean mix up.
Yeah, it's like a screwball comedy when they start chasing each other.
Right. And just the one thing I've never seen ever before was this idea that like Aunt Lila at one point wants to tail Elliot and Portia and Drew. And Drew and Portia and Elliot want to tail Aunt Lila. So you have two groups of people wanting to tail each other.
And it's all mistaken identity because Susan Sarandon, they're all really looking for Dory and Chip. And none of those people who are chasing each other are Dory or Chip.
Right. And it's crazy how they both want to chase each other, and then they're not even trying to find the right person.
Mm-hmm.
And then besides that, they drive into one of those little like loops that you can get into when you're driving somewhere, and you can get off at any point.
A traffic circle.
There you go, one of those, yes. And they're just driving around. And the episode's called The Infinite Loop because at one point they're just driving around a traffic circle, tailing each other.
It's very silly.
Yeah, I just thought it was so funny. Well, they get Dory and they bring her into a hotel. And
they actually kidnap her again. She goes through having to be forced into a trunk again, which is there's a lot of like revisiting moments in this last season here. So she's kidnapped again because she has been brainwashed and doesn't want to be with her friends. She runs from him and they have to chase her down.
The show kind of just hits the brakes at that point, and we go to this episode that's all about Chantal. And the thing is, I remember both of us kind of being like, "Oh boy, Chantal episode."
Yeah, I really dislike Chantal's character.
Yeah, she's a very unlikable character, and that was kind of the main joke of the finale of the first season, right? Was like Dory spent all this time trying to find this girl, and it turns out she's sort of this like kind of loser, obnoxious character.
Yeah.
And so this episode is all about this loser, obnoxious character and her family.
Right. The whole season she hasn't been around, so it's interesting like that they went back to Chantal and they give her the entire episode.
Yeah, it's part of this whole thing where the show kind of comes full circle. There's all these characters. You see the journey that Dory has come through, and they really hit upon that in the finale of the show too. But the Chantal episode, I don't know about you, Sherry, but like to me, at first I was like, oh, this is gonna be rough. But then I thought it got funnier as it got on, and I liked how it tied into the main story too. What about you?
I do like how what happens in the Chantal episode is what eventually leads to Dory coming back to who she is and realizing who she really is, because she thought she was Stephanie. She's been brainwashed by Chip. Anyway, she sees Chantal on TV, and that's what jogs her memory and brings her back to reality. However, the whole Chantal episode I didn't really enjoy because I don't like that character so severely. It had funny moments, but I just don't like her, so it was hard for me, kind of.
Yeah.
I don't know if I needed a whole episode of her. But I do realize that the show started with a search for her, so maybe they felt this need towards the end here. This might be the final season. Maybe they felt the need to revisit Chantal.
Episode 9 ends where Dory is once again locked in this basement dungeon.
Oh, with all the smoke coming in and everything.
And she like passes out too from the smoke.
Mm-hmm.
So you think, oh, and over the credits, instead of cool music that they usually play, it's just the sound of flames.
Okay.
So that could have been like, oh shit, season finale.
I guess it could have been. It would have been a cliffhanger, and you'd expect a new season. Whereas
Yeah.
I don't know if this show's going to be renewed.
Yeah.
So I think where they did end it on episode 10 is a possible ending for the whole series. What I read is that it hasn't been renewed, so they kind of left it open to where they could have a season 5, but they'll be satisfied if it ends at season 4.
Okay. Well, you know what? I actually would have been very, very satisfied with the way that this ended had they just cut out the very last scene.
Where Dory wakes up
Yeah,
and it's all a dream.
Yeah, yeah.
I know, I can't believe we had It's All a Dream.
Yeah.
I can't believe we had that, a near-death experience in this case, I think. So she passes out from the smoke. Aunt Lila and Chip are horrible. Dory has returned to them in desperation. She's returned to Chip to try to, she wants him to brainwash her again so she can feel good about herself again, because when she was Stephanie and brainwashed, she was able to forget who she really is, and all the terrible things she's done. So she makes a mistake and returns to him, and he and the evil aunts lock her in the basement and set the house on fire.
Yeah, yeah. And right before that, too, is an interesting kind of character beat, too, right? Because you said that him and the evil aunt lock her in the basement, right? But Chip, he kind of leaves before Lila can do that. Lila kicks Dory down the stairs, right? But there's this I wanted to kind of talk about that one scene between Chip and Dory.
Mm-hmm.
Because she's like, I want to go back, because she hates herself so much, right?
Yeah.
And but Chip is like, hey, but you didn't even ask me about me at all.
Yeah.
And the show, I feel like the show, there's so much of it which is like, these characters are selfish, they only think about themselves. We talk about Chantal, she only thinks about herself, right? So I wasn't expecting that line where Chip was going to be like, well, did you ask me about me? I found out I'm a product of incest.
Right.
You know?
I got problems.
Yeah. But like you said, the aunt keeps her down in the basement, and he's in the car, and he like waves goodbye to Dory with the Dory doll. The house goes on fire, right? And the one sequence I thought really hit me the most, that was the most exciting, was as she's passing out, she has a flashback to when she's trying to get out of Chip's trunk, right?
Yes.
And they show it, and I'm like, okay, why are they showing this scene? Because they have flashback to that particular scene where she's just screaming, and they show that Dory actually was able to get out of Chip's trunk.
Yeah.
And that
she escapes
the
day he kidnapped her.
And so I don't know about you, but like when you saw that, did you think that like, oh, were they gonna do like some kind of different timeline where she got out? Like, what did you think when you saw that moment?
I wasn't really thinking about it. I was just kind of watching the show to see what was going to happen. And when she went and got back in the trunk, I was like, oh my God. Like,
yeah.
To me, that was deep.
Yes.
It was deep because it means that Dory chose to let herself be victimized. And it spoke to me because, again, this is a character who hates herself so much, who is so ashamed of all the things she's done. I think it's a natural progression for someone who feels that way to want to punish themselves. So that's what I think Dory, that's why she goes and gets back in the trunk. She knows she's being kidnapped. She knows that what's coming probably isn't going to be good.
Yeah.
So I think it's partly that, her wanting to punish herself. And it's partly also this girl who doesn't know what to do with her life or what she wants from her life. Like, hey, something interesting, exciting's happened. So let's see where this narrative goes.
Yeah. And so you said before that the show is like so deep. Like, look at this kind of stuff that we're talking about. You know, it's like guilt over what she had to do just to survive.
Mm-hmm.
And then also this like existential, like, oh man, what am I doing with myself? And that in itself, even if she didn't have this guilt for the crimes she committed, just that existential guilt of like, what do I live for, right?
Yeah.
That's like overwhelming sometimes, and I'm really impressed with the show that they captured that.
It's a wolf in sheep's clothing because this show's like a comedy. You think it's a comedy, but there's really a lot going on under the surface.
Yeah. You know, prior to her going back to Chip's house, she asks all the other people in the diner. She asks Elliot, she asks Drew.
Her friends.
Yeah, she asks her friends, like, why do you live? Like, why do you get up, you know?
Mm-hmm.
That's why I made my little list here, you know?
And they actually have a hard time answering that question. It's kind of stumps them a little bit, and they give some shallow answers, which Elliot even admits as soon as he answers he's not sure if he believes what he just said.
When Dory takes their car and leaves, the group then tries to go back to Chip's house and walk, but before they can even do that, they get confronted by Drew's family, who just starts singing. Like,
oh, I almost forgot about that part. He gets proposed to by his
the princess girl.
by his desperate kind of sort of girlfriend.
And it's so awkward.
It's surreal.
It's ridiculous.
I really like the little moment where she's like, "Just say yes." Say yes, and he's like, "I need to talk to you in private," and she's like, just turns around and goes, "He said yes," and the whole family's like, "Yay!" And he's like, "No, I didn't." Yeah. I also want to talk about the scene where the three friends are walking and they're on the side of the road after that ridiculous proposal, and they all break down and start talking, like admitting to themselves who they really are, which is that they don't know, for one, and that they also might be acting like terrible people in their normal everyday lives. You know, Elliot has like pretty funny like wailing speech about all the guns like going off
in his gun factory.
Yeah, it's very funny, but it's kind of nice to see them admit that they know they're bad people a lot of the time, and they haven't done that this whole show.
And Drew, like an example of that, he says that this princess is this good person that loves him, but yet he feels like he can't love her because he's not a good person and he's in love with Dory.
Right, they all realize there's a lot of self-realization going on for all the characters.
Yeah, throughout the course of the series, it seemed like, you know, Drew loved Dory. He really loved Dory. Dory didn't love him that much. And then it started to seem like he didn't like her. And then by the end of these last two episodes, you can clearly see that Drew really loved Dory.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's sad. And we see this in the finale. Because the finale, if you had any kind of question about Dory's fate, it seemed like she was dead by the finale. Because Dory was wearing this, like, kind of matrixy coat. She walks into a wake. And it is her own funeral, basically, right?
Yeah, a memorial service.
And she's the Dory with the shaved head. And there's Drew and all the friends and a lot of the characters we've seen throughout the course of the show. And they all have things to say about Dory.
They bring back her ex, Julian.
Yeah.
Played by Brendan Michael Hall, who was excellent when he was on the show, but hasn't been on the show the last couple of seasons.
Yeah, he was like briefly in the last season, and then this was the first time you see him in this season.
I was so glad to see him. But yes, he makes a small appearance here.
Yeah. And then you have her employer, who's
Christine Taylor.
Yeah.
Who's the original, or not the original Marcia, but the Marcia from the 90s Brady Bunch.
Yeah. As the characters give speeches, each one of the three friends gives a speech about Dory, right? And Dory's sitting in the back of the memorial service, and they kind of hint upon different parts that happen on the show throughout the series, and you see these different versions of Dory show up. You know, you see this kind of femme fatale looking Dory in this dress that's from the previous season when she's on trial, right? And then you see the Dory from like the beginning of the show where she's just kind of, you know, younger looking. And
the Dory from all four seasons shows up, and they all sit next to each other.
Yeah,
and they all observe this memorial where people talk about her.
Yeah.
And the show makes this seem like Dory's dead. Like, it seems like they're really giving a speech they might really give. They're not totally happy with Dory, but they do come to an understanding about who she was and why she did what she did, right? And they recognize the flaws in her in themselves, and they all kind of give some good speeches, or, you know, maybe good's not the right word, but effective speeches.
The speeches are like appropriate for who they are as a character.
Yes, that's what I'm trying to say, I think.
And so it seems like this great send-off. This could be the end of the show, right? You know, at the very end, it seems like she dies. She walks out, like, and then she's in her trench coat again. She walks out, and then there's the three Dorys prior, and they kind of all like line up to where they're parallel, and it goes into one Dory, and it's like, boop, the show's over, right?
And to me, that was all of her different identities finally coming together into one person, and maybe she can accept all the parts of her.
Yeah.
Because all along, she's had such a hard time reconciling herself with the fact that she's not always a good person, and like just all the psychology that goes into how to deal with who you really are and the dark aspects of yourself, and how you want to seem to the world, but how you really are. So having those four go together is really like great final moment.
Yeah, well, so you're saying that like basically it's this good finale, right? It kind of wraps up the whole show.
I was satisfied.
Like thematically, it works, right?
I was satisfied. I didn't know if I really wanted Dory to die at the end of this show.
Yeah.
But I was like, okay, they did a good job wrapping it up.
Yeah.
You think?
Yeah. I mean, notoriously, just to kind of speak upon that, through many of the shows that I've loved in recent history, that have characters that kind of become more villainous, they usually die by the finale, and so I kind of thought it was fitting, and so.
Well, wouldn't that be predictable? And this show has been anything but predictable.
Yeah, but there's difference between trying to subvert expectations and then like ultimately like yeah, that's the right thing to do. Right? You can always try to do something different, but if it's like, yeah, this is the right way to just end it all.
Okay, so with that in mind, what do you think of the very end?
Yeah, I'm kind of disappointed because like I don't like the idea of like, oh, I just dreamt that funeral
Mm-hmm.
service and I just dreamt it where it kind of had like other people's perspectives and stuff. I don't like that. It kind of reminds me of like Dallas, right? When they had the whole Who Shot JR, and it turns out it was just a dream, and he's in the shower at the very end of the season.
Yeah, or the Ultimate Wizard of Oz. That's
Yeah.
the ultimate. It was a dream, you know, film. But I've been thinking about that ending, and so she's alive. They could have a season 5.
Yeah.
Um, and we just have to look at that whole last episode as like a near death experience, and her seeing, I guess, what people really thought of her.
Yeah.
But like, and like subconsciously again, her coming to terms with who she really is.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, honestly, I don't know if I'd want to watch another season because I feel like it reached this sort of end point, and unless they like started some kind of new thing, I don't think it would be good to
The
keep going.
the new thing would have to be she's coming back from a near death experience now, on top of all the other trauma
Yeah.
she's been through. So it would be a lot.
Yeah.
It would be a lot. It might be a good ending point for the show. However, it's kind of a cliffhanger ending again.
Kind of, because she's still alive. Like, will she get back with
Yeah,
her friends?
yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I think they're probably hoping to get renewed, so they gave themselves an opening.
Yeah.
Like, did they want to go on with the show without Alia's Shawkat?
Right. Like, I think of like two shows, just off the top of my head. Like, I think of like Babylon 5, which they didn't expect to have this last season, so they kind of wrapped everything up in their 4th season. But then it's like, oh, well, let's start this new thing for the 5th season, right? Or like Supernatural, where the guy that was in charge of the show had this great arc for 5 seasons. But then they're like, well, people love the show, so they just kept going and going.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's what I was trying to say before, is that like, if things organically wrap up, it's I think it's better to just let it be versus like trying to like keep it going.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that's human psychology, though, to want, like you said, to tie a bow and to say this is finished. And the show has never really wanted to be that simple or been that interested in pleasing the viewer, I don't think. So I don't think they care. You know, that we want it all nicely wrapped up and tied up. They're not willing to do that. Or I actually think I trust these writers a lot. And I trust them enough to think that they have a reason for doing it this way.
Yeah.
Like if they do get a season 5, I am hoping they're going to just keep surprising us and come up with something really interesting, and we'll be glad that there's a season 5. That's kind of what I expect, even though I didn't love this.
Well, so what did you guys think? Because you watched this after you watched our last review, and you watched this after you watched all of Search Party. So what did you guys think of the ending? Let us know in the comments. And make sure that you like and subscribe as well. As we move into February, we are going to start listening to some short stories, mostly horror-themed short stories. And Sherry and I are going to try to do a review every week of those. So this is a wrap for Search Party, and we hope to see you guys in February.
Bye.